We are still working on adding fractions, two fractions with unlike denominators. Let's look at another example. We have two fractions, two different denominators, and we're going to add them together. Our fractions are 1/5 and 2/3. Remember, we said whenever you see fractions, the first thing you need to pay attention to is your denominator or your denominators. And if they are the same, you keep it, focus on your numerator. But if they are different, then you know that you need to do extra work. We need to find equivalent fractions of 1/5 and 2/3. Remember, we said the way we do that is you take your denominators, find multiples of your denominators, see the least number that they share, and then you set that number as your new denominator. Now let's look at it. From here, we can see that 1/5 is the same thing as 3/15, and 2/3 is the same thing as 10/15. We can already see that 5 and 3, they share the number 15. Let's look at some multiples. We have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and so on and so forth. Because we know that our new denominator is 15, we can just stop here. Let's look at 5, because remember, we're taking multiples of our denominators, not your numerator. Because if you do your numerator, you're just going to get it wrong. And remember, your denominator, it tells us how many parts to break your bar model up into or how many parts there are. But being that you have two fractions, we know that we're taking those two fractions from a whole or from your unit. And that's why we need to do our multiples of our denominators to find out what is that whole that we're taking our denominators from. You have 5, 10, 15, 20, and of course, you can always go higher. But remember, we need to find the least number, not the greatest or not anything higher than the least. We can see that both 3 and 5, they share the number 15. And that tells us that our LCD is now 15. I know some of you might ask, what is the whole point of doing this? But the whole point of doing this is so that we can have the same denominators or the same denominators. Because if your denominators are not the same, you cannot add them. You cannot subtract. You cannot divide. There is a special rule when we're multiplying fractions. You don't need to find your LCD, but that's for another lesson. If your denominators are different and you're adding, subtracting, or dividing, then you know that you need to find your least common denominator and get your denominators to be the same by finding equivalent fractions. We have 1/5 is the same thing as 3/15, and we have 2/3. That's the same as 10/15. And we are going to focus on our new fractions, which is 3/15 and 10/15. And now we're going to add them together because those are the same denominators. Keep your denominator, focus on your numerator, which is 3 plus 10. And we know that 3 plus 10 is equal to 15. So guess what? 3 plus 10 is equal to 13, not 15. Oh my. So that is our answer. There's nothing less, there's nothing less for us to do.